So, this episode is part of a 10-ish message series commemorating the 10-year anniversary of when I first started my business back in the spring of 2013. Each message features a lesson or a story or something worth noting, a theme worth anchoring in from that particular year. Some are more life focused, some are more business focused, some cover lots of time, some cover very specific moments of time, and there's absolutely crossover because time travel is a thing in this retrospective mode where hindsight's 2023. Know that I would genuinely love to hear your feedback, any insights or questions that come up as you're listening. And I'm absolutely open to requests for future episodes to go deeper on any specifics that you'd love to hear more about. Just take a screenshot and tag me at Nikki Elledge Brown as you're listening, or hit the link in the comment box in the show notes and let me know. All right, here we go. Obviously, 2020 was a big year for all of us here in the human family. And for our immediate family here in our home, it was a huge year because it was the year that we finally got to meet Noe, our fifth and final member of this Brown family team roster. And as I mentioned in the 2019 message, it was just so clear to me looking back that there were so many seeds planted in 2019 that came to fruition in 2020. And there are so many things I could have named this one, like Naptime Empires season 3, because she's my third and final Naptime Empires muse. But she really stepped up. Like, her energy was so huge to me for obviously so many reasons, as my body was doing its part to facilitate the creation of hers. But also creatively, I chose my pregnancy as inspiration to complete the first draft of the Naptime Empires book, which at the time I'm recording this in 2023 is still yet to be published. but the goal for me right now, I'll tell you, is to go ahead and have at least one version of it ready by the time the New Year's ball drops this year. Nonetheless, when I started the year in 2020, I had clear plans for my business. I actually emailed my email list. I was like, okay, I'm going to retire A Course About Copy. We're going to wrap up the Naptime Empires podcast. I'm going to launch this new podcast called On Her Terms. I had all these plans. I spoke them out into being in inboxes around the world. And then literally that weekend, within 3 days, I found out I was pregnant again. So if you're keeping track, this means that I was pregnant not once or twice, but 3 times from June of 2019 to January of 2020. So Noe actually did hit the scene before the pandemic fully, took place, but she was our highlight all throughout the year. She was basically with us, all of 2020, and really shook things up. I would say it's the whole, if you want to make God laugh, tell him or her your plans, but really this was all very intentional. The things that finally came to life and started really rolling and building momentum in 2020, because I was like, well, if I'm pregnant, then this is the perfect time to bring back the Naptime Empires podcast and to record conversations, Lucky Batch style, as I did in 2015. I decided I would go ahead and record conversations so that I would have podcasts that I could release even once she was here in physical form. And so I will say, though, I announced, like I said, in January, right before I found out I was pregnant, I announced I was going to do this like a graduation party of A Course About Copy, and I was going to do a Facebook group and blah, blah, blah. I had big plans at the end of 2019. And then once I was pregnant in 2020, I had basically no physical energy to follow through on these plans. It was like I actually just wanted to go to sleep and watch all of Netflix, this wrap party. I just was so consumed, also mentally, like I said, because of my experiences with pregnancy loss in the past. I was feeling very anxious. Is this going to last? Is it not? I was trying and throwing everything at it in terms of my own mental support and physical support and acupuncture and chiropractic and all of these things. But in that first trimester, it was just about holding myself together as much as I could to get to a point where I felt like, okay, again, knowing that no day is guaranteed, but I would repeat my mantra, today I am pregnant. I would tell myself when I was feeling nervous in the middle of the night, you are safe, you are loved, you are whole, you are enough. I was saying that to this little being, and I was saying it to myself. You are safe, you are loved, you are whole, you are enough. And so finally, near the end of the first trimester, that's when I decided well, and of course it's pandemic and quarantine time. And honestly, my years before this, it's like I had been preparing for times such as these. I had been a hermit in our home here in my hometown. Like I hadn't really been getting out much. And so honestly, my day-to-day life didn't really change much, and my husband had been home for the most part. And so it was like everyone who was like dealing with their spouse in their space all the time. I'm like, I know, right? This is a challenge. This is what we've been trying to navigate for all these years. And so we had our two boys home. This is also, if you remember in 2019, I said I was dreaming about some kind of RV situation and a hybrid homeschool situation. And here it was, dropped in our lap. So our oldest was schooling, from home. I think most kids were at that point, but we also chose to continue that for the fall of 2020 for that school year, because we were in the baby bubble. And of course we didn't want to expose her unnecessarily to any school cooties. Now I'm just thinking about this year and what a challenge that has been for the 2023 school year. But anyway, so all of these things were happening all of a sudden, all those seeds that were planted. Okay, Jeremy's watching all of RV YouTube, so he's planning to figure out if we're going to get one, which one are we going to get, what would be best for us. And we're testing this homeschooling situation. What would that actually be like? Is that even something that we'd want to do? I'll share more about that in 2021. And then I'm pregnant and things are going well. Obviously, health is a priority for everyone because it's 2020, it's pandemic. We don't know what's happening. But I decided to just go all in on creativity and channel this human pomodoro timer. If you're not familiar with the pomodoro technique, where it's literally about setting a kitchen timer, 25 minutes. I'll link my other podcast episodes that I have about this, but just to make progress, but also to give yourself some constraints so that if you squirrel, you can catch yourself and you can stay really focused, and using that as an advantage to really channel your energy on a particular project. And so I was considering Noe to be my human pomodoro timer, because I was going to see if I could get the book out before the baby came out. And so I was investing in self-publishing at the time. That was the plan. And I got the support. I'm like, okay, so we can't really do anything until I have this first draft. So I ended up writing this first draft. It was, I want to say 120, it might have been 140,000 words in 10 days. This was intense, to say the least, but my husband was home. My boys were home, so they were all handled. And I'm just this pregnant lady sitting in my home office, typing. I had written and drafted, and I have actually a whole episode on Naptime Empires about this in the book mode season. So I'll link to that too, about what I was doing. But the whole point for this episode is to say I was in the creative flow. It was just all of these words, all of these stories, all of these thoughts just needed a place to live outside of my head. Are they all going to be in the book? No. But it was progress at the time. It's kind of like this week we had a leak in our water line, or we thought we did. And so whenever they shut it off and then you turn it back on, there can be some dirt and sediment whenever you first turn the faucets back on. And it's like, that's what needed to come out. So even if half of what I wrote never sees the light of day beyond my Google Drive, I knew it served the purpose to get to the next stage, and then to get to the next stage after that. So I was putting a lot of pressure on myself. And then again, there's more about this in the actual Naptime Empires podcast where I'm sharing it. But for the purpose of this one, I'll go ahead and spoil it, as I already have, which is to say, Noe came first. The book did not. And the lesson there for me was to acknowledge that it's still progress. Like, it wasn't a pass fail. Oh, now I'm going to give up and I'm never going to write the book. But it was like, great, now I have that experience. I know what I'm capable of if I really want to be capable of, and just really go full focus on a creative project that means something to me. I know that I am incredibly motivated when I'm pregnant because of my human Pomodoro timers. Again, that's exactly what happened with Vegan in 2020. And that's why, 2015. That's when I batch recorded videos for my blog posts at the time, and wrote the emails, and re-recorded the 20 prep school videos in a day. Like, I was very focused because I knew I wanted to be ready to take my foot off the gas. It's biz nesting. And there's an entire chapter on this also in the Naptime Empires book, because it's about how you want to prepare so that whenever baby comes, which we can't control or predict, that you have the time and space and resources to spend your time how you want to. That's ideal, and that looks different for everyone, and you don't know until you're actually going through it. So if you could just bake in flexibility so that you've got options, hashtag on her terms, that's the ideal outcome. So that's what I was doing in 2020. I was hosting space for my daughter to be created through me, which was a huge blessing. Thankfully, I felt great once I made it through that first trimester. Physically, I was working with a virtual, like she's a local personal trainer who I love. Hi, Kim. But I was working with her virtually a couple times or a few times a week just to really focus on strength and being in my body. Obviously, I was also a lot in my head. The batching of the podcast, I would do one a week rather than trying to do a whole bunch in one day, especially towards the end. I was just straight up out of breath because there wasn't much room because somebody was squishing my lungs. And so I would only do like at 11 o'clock on Thursday morning. That's when I would want to have a conversation that I could record with the podcast. Also because everybody was home. And so for the Naptime Empires podcast, I use a different microphone. I try to have quiet and a little higher quality audio. We've talked about lo-fi podcasting before. I'll link to that below as well, because that's not the aim of this podcast. This is way more casual intentionally, but I still wanted to have reasonable quiet if I could for those conversations. And so I was just like, one a week, that's great. And I just called up and invited people on, and we would book those. And that's how I slowly batched those. And I'm so glad that I have them, because they're really great conversations, but also it felt good. Like once Noe was here, it wasn't like I was actively promoting anything to share client services wise. Although I did work with clients, I hosted a couple of mini master sessions. I had private clients in 2020, but I knew once she was here, I just wanted to be able to take my foot off the gas of serving or focusing on anyone, or at least being committed to serving anyone outside of my immediate family. And I knew I wanted to keep in touch with people via the podcast. And that's exactly what happened. Again, I'll share more nitty gritty tips on biz nesting and ideas on that in the Naptime Empires book. But the key there is really knowing that there's no one right way to do it. Spoiler, you already know this. There's no one right way to do it. And even the best laid plans, you have to be able to be flexible. So whatever you can do while you have the energy and resources to do it, to make it easier for your future self, I highly recommend it. One surprising thing too that I did create that year was a birth story report on Instagram stories. I was not planning to share any of it. I don't know, I might take it down one day, but if you want to see it and it's still up, it would be on my Instagram stories. Nothing graphic or anything like that, but we had just documented so much because I wanted to, because this was my last round 3, and I knew that I would want to be able to look back at it and share it with her one day. It was a big year. She was our bright spot for sure. And leading into, we also bought an RV the month after so we had this book draft, we had a baby, and then we bought an RV, right? I told you all those seeds were planted in 2019. So that's how we finished the year in 2020. I have this manuscript. I have this brand new baby girl. We have this beautiful RV, and we have the flexibility to do this hybrid homeschool situation and see if it's all it was cracked up to be in our heads. And that is exactly where we're heading with 2021. I can tell you now, again, with this hindsight, that I had a few key lessons yet to integrate. And that's exactly why the book didn't exist yet, because everything I've learned in the last few years is absolutely integral seasoning to the Naptime Empires message. More on that one in 2021. Are we there yet? Okay, technically that was the end of the episode, but since you're still here, 1, I'd love to thank you for spending part of your day with me, and 2, I'd love to ask you if you would take 30 seconds, maybe 60, to leave a rating and review in your podcast app before you tap out today. If you've already done that, it's amazing. Please send me a screenshot so I can thank you personally, and know that sharing this episode with a friend has the same magical powers, and I deeply appreciate both. Also, in case you're listening to the end to see if I ever actually introduce myself, hi! My name is Nikki Elledge Brown. I'm the host and author of Naptime Empires and this here On Her Terms podcast. You can find me around the internet at Nikki Elledge Brown in most places, but what you may appreciate most is actually over at onherterms.com. It's what I call the insider library. It's where you can get inside scoop, first listen rights, email updates every time there's a new episode, and then special insider only bonus content. It's all over in our private feed. Okay, that's a wrap for real. I'll meet you in the next episode.